don't care if you are red or blue, you need to listen up. If you are a woman that has changed your name from your birth certificate, let's say through marriage, and you took your husband's name, you are no longer eligible to vote if this bill passes the Senate. It's already passed the House. So wake up. I am awake. 69 million women have changed their last name from their birth certificate and would be ineligible to vote. This bill also requires that you have to register to vote in person. Doesn't matter if you're elderly, disabled, doesn't matter, in person. And a driver's license will no longer do. You have to have a passport or your birth certificate. But if you've changed your name at all from your original birth certificate, you're fucked. Okay? So we need this bill not to pass. It goes both ways. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. Ironically, the bill is sponsored by the Republican Party. My Senator Mike Lee from Utah is a big proponent of this bill, but I'm just going to read you. It goes both ways on both parties, okay, are not exempt from this. Because if you're talking about which states possess more passports, it's blue states. It's the Democratic states. Red states are going to suffer from this in a very big way. Now, just to put it into perspective, there are approximately 146 million American citizens that do not possess a passport. 153 million Americans voted in the last election. So that leaves 7 million Americans left to vote if we're going by those stats. But then only 1 in 4 or 1 in 5, if you're in a red state, possess an actual passport. Now, if you've ever applied for a passport, it takes at least 6 months. You should plan 6 months ahead and several $100s later, but that's only if it will be the same as your birth certificate. We are absolutely going backwards. We need to stop this bill from being passed. Now, you can download this app called 5 Calls. I've downloaded it. It's extremely easy. It shows you all the bills that are coming up, and it gives you your senators, your House of Representatives based on your zip code. All you have to do, you don't even have to leave the app. You call, there's a script, all the numbers, everything is all there for you. This is a way that we can make a difference. The fact that it's already passed the House of Representatives is mind-boggling. This needs to stop.
Okay, so I'm making my coffee this morning, and I was just looking through the news, and I wanted to remind everyone that they're voting on the SAVE Act today, which, if you're a woman and you are married, or you have a different, or anybody, and you have a different name than what matches your birth certificate, you should be genuinely concerned, because it will stop you from voting if they pass this act, and you do not have you need a passport with the same last name as your ID, which is not cheap for everybody, and definitely not accessible for everybody. So keep that in mind. Pay attention to the vote today, and good luck, everybody.
So if you are a woman who's married, who changed her last name, and you like your right to vote, make sure that you have a passport. Go get you a passport right now, because you're not going to be able to vote if you don't have a passport that matches your married name if this bill passes. The SAVE Act is going to require that married women who changed our last name have either a birth certificate that matches our new last name, none of us do, or a passport that matches our married last name. So you got to go get your passport if you like your right to vote, if you would like to vote, and you are a married woman with a changed last name. Is this discriminatory? Of course it is. That's their goal.
Today I introduced an amendment that would have stopped this bill from being implemented unless we could just certify that no eligible married woman would be denied the right to vote. That should go without saying. Republicans blocked it. Let me repeat that. Republicans voted down my amendment that just would have ensured that women who are eligible and registered could still cast their ballot. This puts up to 70 million women at risk of disenfranchisement. 70 million. That's 1 in 4 voters in this country. And the burden will fall hardest on working mothers, caregivers, those juggling jobs and families who have barely a moment to spare. It's outrageous that in the year 2025, more than a century after the 19th Amendment was ratified, we still have to defend a woman's right to vote. But we will, every single day, if that's what it takes. because this is personal. It's for the mom in Gresham who can't afford to take unpaid time off work to go hunt down paperwork. It's for the woman in Hood River whose name no longer matches her birth certificate, who doesn't have the $160 for a passport. Are we really going to tell her she can't vote? Republicans failed to show up for their mothers, their daughters, their wives, and every woman in their life. But we are going to keep showing up, and we're just getting started. We're not going to stop until we build a government where working mothers and families can also thrive.
What is she talking about? She's talking about an amendment that she tried to put forth that the Republicans voted down to ensure that women will be able to vote after they tried to pass the SAVE Act. Now, they claim the SAVE Act is to stop illegal immigrants from voting. That only U.S. citizens would vote. That's great. I wholeheartedly agree with that, except there's language in that bill that if your driver's license doesn't match your birth certificate, if your Social Security card doesn't match your birth certificate, you would not be allowed to vote. As she said, 1 in 4 women would not be able to vote because their driver's license doesn't match their birth certificate. Their Social Security card doesn't match their birth certificate. Why? Because they are married. They have taken their husband's name. They would not be allowed to vote because they want you to have to show not just your driver's license, but a birth certificate as well when you go to vote. That is bullshit. That is taking the right to vote away from women. And I always see conservatives on this app saying, well, what rights have I lost as a woman? What rights did they take away? Well, this is point blank in your face. This is bullshit. If you are a male and you are married, you have a girlfriend, whatever, you are going to get married. Think about this and how it will affect you, your daughter in the future, and then you can put your blame on Republicans.
House Bill 22, otherwise known as the SAVE Act, will prohibit millions of eligible voters of actually voting, as well as married women. In order to be eligible to vote under this act, you would have to bring proof of citizenship in person when voting, including a passport or birth certificate. Government-issued IDs would not meet the bill's requirements. Why? Well, the bill states that you can use a real ID, but you don't have to be a citizen to be eligible for one. You can use your tribal ID, but most tribal identifications don't list your place of birth. You can't use your military ID unless it is accompanied with a military service record that shows that you were born in the United States. So military members born overseas could not use this. If you got married and changed your last name, you could not use a birth certificate because it does not match. And marriage certificates or name changes are not part of acceptable documentation under this bill. But it's okay because you can use your passport in the alternative, right? Except for about 146 million Americans don't currently possess a passport. The irony is that Republicans are supportive of this bill, but it's Republicans who will be affected by this the most. Passport ownership is disproportionately lower in red states consisting of working class and lower income Americans. And Republican women are more likely to change their last name during marriage than Democratic women. What's the point of this act? You're just taking away your own votes.
Do not disengage. The bill to take women's voting rights away is next week. It could be Monday, it could be Friday, but it is next week. If the SAVE Act passes, you will need 2 forms of ID, and one of them will have to prove your citizenship. They will both have to have matching last names. Okay? Your driver's license and military ID do not count. Right now, the way the bill reads, a passport will count. They are $165 or $215 if you have to have it rushed. This will impact married women who have changed their last names, military families who will have to re-register as citizens every single time they move. It will impact our elderly. It will impact our low income. The Heritage Foundation believes that men should have the vote for the household. So they are doing this under the guise of immigration election security, but that is why they are pushing this bill forward. If it passes the House, it will easily pass the Senate. We need you to contact your House representatives today. This is real. This is not theoretical. If it passes, you will have to have a passport to vote. Do you understand what's happening? Of course, it's going to go into the courts after it goes through, but you shouldn't have to fight for something that's already yours. You already have the right to vote. You need to contact your representatives today. This is real. It's time. It's time to get involved, you guys. This is next week. This is next week. Next week, you could lose your right to vote if you changed your last name when you got married. It's time to get involved.
Republicans are trying to make it harder for women to vote. Let's talk about it. This week, Congress is voting on the SAVE Act, and if Republicans have their way, 30% of women could be blocked from voting. The SAVE Act is a blatant attack on voting rights designed to make it harder, if not impossible, for millions of Americans to vote, including the vast majority of married women in this country who would be unable to provide a valid birth certificate according to the Act. The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act is a piece of legislation that would require Americans to present their citizenship information in person whenever registering to vote or trying to update their information. Includes address changes or things that people could typically do online. Specifically, the legislation requires the vast majority of Americans to rely on a birth certificate in order to register or to use their passport, which is not as easy as it sounds. In reality, over 140 million Americans do not possess a passport, and to put that in perspective, only 153 million Americans voted in the 2024 presidential election. And at least 69 million women in the country have taken their spouse's legal name since getting married, which means they do not have a birth certificate that matches their legal name at the moment, making all of those women who have taken their husband's last name ineligible to register to vote or update their voter registration because the act requires you to use your birth certificate to prove your legal name. And the Democratic Women's Caucus actually tried to introduce an amendment to protect women, and Republicans voted that amendment down. And before you say I'm overreacting, nowhere in this legislation does it provide options to show a change of name certificate or a marriage certificate along with your birth certificate to prove your name, and that is very intentional. And because documentation is required to be shown in person, it stops voters from being able to vote by mail nationally or at voter registration drives. And it eliminates online voter registration essentially overnight, a service that 42 states and most of our service members rely on in order to register to vote. You already have to be a citizen to vote in the US. This legislation serves the only purpose, which is to make it harder for certain communities, women and people of color, to vote. Voter suppression is an attack on democracy. Call your members and tell them to vote no on the SAVE Act immediately. Remember, if your vote wasn't so important, they wouldn't be working so hard to take it away from you.
They are coming after women's suffrage, women's right to vote. You heard me. There is a bill that has already passed the House of Representatives called the SAVE Act that within it restricts married women's ability to vote. How is that possible? Well, as part of the law, it requires that the name on your voter ID that you show when you go to the polls match that on your birth certificate. Now, when women get married in this country, the majority of them change their last name to that of their husbands. Their ID no longer matches what's on their birth certificate, their maiden name. Under this law, they would no longer be allowed to vote. Only their husband would be allowed to vote. There is nothing in the law currently that has any provision for name changes for marriage. And this honestly is straight out of Project 2025, where they want the man or the head of the household to have the one vote for the entire family. So this is the first step in attacking a woman's right to vote. As for taking away all of our voting rights, that can only be done via a constitutional amendment, the 19th.
So I'm sure you guys remember when Trump said this.
In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Well, that fix is very quietly making its way through Congress, and I need y'all to know about it because it could possibly disenfranchise millions of women voters. It's called the SAVE Act, and it would make it where every single person has to register in person with either a passport or a birth certificate. Now, as many as 140 million people don't have a passport, but the bigger issue is that as many as 69 million women don't have a birth certificate that matches their current legal name because they changed it when they got married. And I don't think I have to remind you who women tend to vote for more, and that gap is only getting bigger. Especially the gap between black women and men that was 15 points in the last election. And on top of all that, which is obviously bad enough, it would also restrict people's ability to register online or through the mail. It would even restrict the ability of nonpartisan civic groups to do registration drives, which accounted for 1/5 of all registration applicants in the last election, basically the same as California, Florida, and Texas combined. Oh, and just so we're crystal clear, there is no reason for this bill because voter fraud is a made-up issue. In fact, about one person for every 10 million votes gets charged with voter fraud. All these old white dudes know they can't repeal the 19th Amendment, so this garbage SAVE Act is their next best thing. So I need you to call your congressman, call your senator, and if you would, maybe share this video, because we cannot let this bill pass.